And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure oil olive, beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually in the tabernacle of the congregation. And it shall be a statute forever in your generations.
The Eternal Light. The National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations make free time available to present The Eternal Light, a program which comes to you under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Today's program, in observance of Memorial Day, is The Man Who Changed His Mind by Peter Lyon.
The other day I was talking to a young fella, and he says to me,
Well, now, mind you, of course, some of them are my best friends, but you gotta admit there's a difference between them and us.
I looked at the young fella who said that, and I could see he wasn't kidding. He meant it. Of course, it takes all kinds to make a world, but here it is, halfway through the 20th century, and there are still some with no more mother wit than a webfoot. Now, this young fella, he opens his mouth and keeps right on talking.
Fact of the matter is, and I say this, and some of them are my best friends, but still in all, they're the ones who's responsible for all the headaches there are in the world.
Well, now, I'm as peaceable and friendly as my wife's Newfoundland pup, but I can take just so much. So I says to this young fella, I says, now sit right down, I says. Clam your mouth up tight and just sit there and listen, because I'm going to tell you a story. He says,
A story?
And I says, yes, sir. This story is called The Parable of the Man Who Knew Enough to Be Able to Change His Mind. Now, I want you to suppose that it's a long time ago, a long 60 years ago, and think of a boy of 10 or 12 who lives in what must be the pleasantest of Connecticut villages, Niantic, where every morning when he gets up, he can gulp down a lungful of salt air off the Atlantic and just be glad he's alive. And on this particular morning, Memorial Day morning it was, he heard the band, the town band playing a few blocks away, and he started to walk in tempo to the brass horns of the band. And all of a sudden, he saw a man with only a left arm and the empty sleeve pinned back where his right arm should have been.
Gee!
And the man was wearing a coat, a military jacket of dark blue.
Gee willikers.
What's that? What's that you said, boy?
Nothing. I didn't say nothing.
Well, that's funny. I thought I heard someone say gee willikers. Well, maybe it was that iron deer up there on Miss Tubbs' lawn.
Maybe it was.
What's your name, boy?
Charles Crawford Smith, Jr.
Oh, you're Charles Crawford Smith's boy, are you?
How'd you know that?
Never mind. I've got my methods of finding things out, and I'm generally right.
Oh, I know. It was because I said my name was Charles.
Now, never mind that. Where are you going, Charlie?
Down to watch the parade. You gonna march in the parade?
Yes, sir, I am. Yes, sir, I most certainly am. I'm going to march in that parade, and all the time I'm marching, I'm going to feel mighty good, too. And you know why?
Why?
Because when I march in that parade, Charlie, I'm marching with the finest men in the whole town of Niantic. And it's like I'm marching with the finest men in every town, village, and city in the country. All at the same time.
The veterans of the Union Army.
Right, Charlie, right. That's one thing you can be sure of, boy. Just like the sun rising in the east. Some dodged the draft, some ducked it, and some bought their way out of it. But the best men, the only good men, were the ones that shouldered a gun and marched off to help save the Union. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
There's the band. Time for the parade. How do I look? Fit?
Yes, sir.
My hair's not all shag nasty now, is it?
No, sir.
And let's get down to that parade.
So then, skipping along in time with the band, hurrying a little to make sure of a good vantage point to watch the parade. The boy took up his position right in front of Mr. Rosen's fishing tackle and bait store. And his heart rose as the flags went by, whipping in the offshore breeze. And his eyes shone as he saw the old soldier who had lost his arm come marching past. And he turned to Mr. Rosen.
Say, Mr. Rosen.
Hi, Charlie.
Say, Mr. Rosen. See that man there, the second one in from the...
You mean the one with his right arm gone?
Yes, that's the one. Who is he?
Well, you know Mr. George Rogers, Charlie. That's his brother Jim Rogers.
Never saw him around town before.
No, well, he's a book agent, Charlie. He's on the road most of the time out west and down south. Understand he's just come back to town to stay for a spell.
He said all the best men were in the Union Army.
I guess that's right, Charlie.
But, Mr. Rosen, you weren't in the... I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say anything.
Don't be embarrassed, Charlie. You see...
I've got to go, Mr. Rosen.
Well, Charlie, wait, Charlie.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rosen.
You know it's terrible to be a kid at 10 or 12 and know you've said something wrong and not know what to do about it. That was the first time it had ever happened to young Charlie Smith. Well, he ran down the street after the parade, caught up with the man whose name was Jim Rogers, marched along beside him, looking up at him for a few dozen yards. Then followed him over to where a big elm tree cast down some welcome shade. And the man unpinned his empty right sleeve and then pinned it back again, more securely, more comfortably.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah?
Mr. Rogers, did you lose your arm in the war?
Yes, Charlie, I did. My right arm was buried in North Carolina, a good deal in advance of the bulk of my funeral.
Was it shot off or cut off or with a bayonet?
Well, the way it happened, Charlie, was like this. I was a corporal at the time. Me and maybe 7 or 8 other fine fellows were walking through a little patch of woods. All of a sudden, the lieutenant who was in charge of our patrol, Kelly, his name was, Lieutenant Kelly. Now, this dumb lieutenant, Charlie, you know about lieutenants, don't you?
No, sir.
Well, all you need to know about lieutenants, son, is this. There never was one of them had enough brains to overflow a thimble. Lieutenants. Well, sir, this lieutenant all of a sudden shouts out, we must all get down.
He seen some Confederates?
Likely. Well, sir, I was a corporal, as I told you, and I decided I wouldn't take orders from that Kelly. So I stood straight up. Ping! A bullet sails right past my ear.
Why didn't you duck?
Stubborn. Pig-headed, Charlie. Ping! Another bullet.
Hit you in the arm?
Not yet. Hit my canteen, and I could hear the water begin to trickle out.
But you didn't duck?
Just because some lieutenant had told me to. Not Jim Rogers. Then, ping!
In the arm?
In the arm, Charlie.
So that proves the lieutenant was right. Well, didn't it?
The point is, Charlie, by standing up, I was able to see where their fire was coming from. So our boys could clean their nest out.
Oh.
See, being stubborn sometimes got its points. What's the matter?
Matter with me?
Got a big scowl on your face.
Oh, I was thinking about what you said about the only good men being in the Army.
That's right.
Well, I was talking to Mr. Rosen.
Who? Rosen? Oh, that man that owns the fishing tackle and bait store?
That's right, and... Well, he's a good man, and he wasn't in the Army.
Rosen? Him?
What's the matter with him?
Charlie, he's a Hebrew.
A what?
He's Jewish, son. Jews didn't fight in the Civil War. Well, don't ask me why, but they didn't. None of them. I don't recall a single one of them fought in the Union Army. And I knew hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men. Not one of them a Jew.
Oh. A Jew. Oh. He's a very nice man.
There's only one test for a man, son. Did he shoulder a gun and march off to help save the Union and free the slaves? If he did, He's a good man. If he didn't, chewy.
No, for some reason, it seemed to the boy as he walked slowly home to dinner that the sun had lost some of its warmth, and the day some of its gay sparkle. He didn't know why. His thoughts were a tanglement, tugging away at each other. All he knew was that he admired this newcomer, Mr. Rogers, and he'd always liked Mr. Rosen. Yet, somehow, somewhy, these things did battle. Well, it wasn't so much later that he went to Mr. Rosen's tackle and bait store. He had 40 cents in his fist he'd earned clipping hedges because he had to pretend his errand was entirely commercial.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Mr. Rosen. Afternoon, Mrs. Rosen.
Well, Charlie, going fishing, are you?
Mm-hmm. I need a new hook, a big one, and,
Yes.
How much is that mother of pearl spinner?
Well, that's 25 cents, Charlie, a quarter.
You get 2 of these hooks for a nickel, Charlie.
Okay, and, let's see, I've got 10 cents. Can I get some line for 10 cents?
Not very much line for 10 cents, Charlie. This is a very complicated purchase, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Well, then, never mind the line, just the spinner and the hook.
Very good, young man.
Mr. Rosen,
Yes?
why weren't you in the Union Army?
Well, Charlie, you see...
Why do you ask such a question, Charlie?
Oh, I don't know,
It's all right, Martha. Why not? Charlie's curious, and why not? You see, Charlie, some people have something wrong with them, which means they wouldn't be good soldiers. Here, you see these glasses?
Yes?
Oh, put them on. Go ahead, put them on. Now look through them. What do you see?
I can't see anything. It hurts to look through them. Boy.
Yes. And what you see when you look through these glasses is about what I see when I don't have them on. A man whose eyes are as weak as mine, Charlie, is no use to an army. Understand?
Well, was your brother in the Army?
I don't have any brothers, you know that.
Well, wasn't anybody in your whole family in the Army?
What are you getting at, Charlie? Why do you ask such questions?
Well, somebody told me that you were Jews and that no Jews would join the Union Army.
Who said that, Charlie?
No matter who said it.
No matter. No matter. News from Hungary and Russia. And now here. This. But no matter.
Charlie, listen to me. We are Jews, yes. That's our religion. Just as yours is Congregationalist. And whoever told you that there were no Jews in the Union Army, I don't care who it was, Charlie. He was wrong. Maybe he thought he was right, but he was wrong. And you shouldn't believe what he told you. All right?
Wow.
Now, you ask your mother, Charlie, or your father. See if they don't say the same as me.
Okay. And thanks, Mr. Rosen.
Well, now, this boy I'm telling you about, there was anyway round about 1 million things could have distracted him. Climbing trees, or kicking a can along the road, or stopping to inspect what makes a grasshopper hop, or trying out his brand new Aggie in the shady dust alongside the town hall. But he'd got this question stuck in his 12-year-old head, and it just had to be answered before he could do anything else.
Charlie, that you?
Yep.
What you been up to all morning?
Mother, is it true that the Jews wouldn't join the Union Army during the Civil War?
Now, where in the world did you get an idea like that?
I was just wondering.
Just wondering. Just wondering, is it?
So I was talking to Mr. Rosen, and he said I should ask you.
Well, I must say, you've asked some fool questions in your time, Charles Crawford Smith, Jr., but this just about takes the cake.
Well, did they join the Army?
Well, sir, it just so happens that I was reading an article about that just a week ago. You find the latest copy of the North American Review, and you can read it for yourself.
The North American Review? What does it say?
It says there were plenty of Jews in the Army. What did you think it would say? Come on now, quick. Scrub your hands good. Dinner's near ready.
Eh? Oh, wondered where you got to, Charlie. You see this mess of old fish guts here? Know what that means, don't you? Weak fish are running, boy, and you and me are going out there on the Sound to do a little chumming.
Sure, Mr. Rogers,
What
but
time you got to be home? 6?
I guess so.
Well, then, we best get a move on. What's that reading matter you got there? Won't have much time for reading, boy, when you're chumming. You got to keep your eyes peeled on the water every minute.
Well, it's a magazine.
Magazine, do tell. Well, it appeared to me it was a baseball bat. North American Review. Well, that's a fine magazine, Charlie, but ain't it a mite too intellectual for you?
I got it for you, Mr. Rogers. See, this article here, it says that there were lots and lots of Jews that fought in the Union Army.
Oh, it does, eh? Where is that now? Let me see that. Lots and lots of them, eh? Well, I warrant the man that wrote this was never closer to the front lines than New York City.
See, look there. They fought shoulder to shoulder with...
Tommy Rot. Stuff, boy. All stuff. And I'll write a letter to this magazine that says so. And I know what I'm talking about, because I was there. Editor, North American Review. Dear Sir, I had served in the field about 8 months before being permanently disabled in action and was quite familiar with several regiments. I then transferred to 2 different recruiting stations, but I cannot recall seeing one Jew in uniform or hearing of any Jewish soldier. In 25 years of travel, always among old soldiers, I have never found any who remembered serving with Jews. Indeed, so marked was this as to become the subject of comment. If so many Jews fought so bravely for their adopted country, surely their champion ought to be able to give their names and the regiments they condescend.
Mr. Rogers! Mr. Rogers! Mr. Rogers! Oh, well, it's Saturday, Mr. Rogers. Aren't you going to take me fishing today?
Hello, Charlie.
I was down to the pier. I didn't see you. I figured you might be at home still.
Yeah?
Yeah? So I came by to see if maybe you'd forgotten or something. Something the matter, Mr. Rogers?
Charlie,
Aren't you feeling good today?
I feel bad. That's a certainty.
I'm sorry.
Yeah? You mind that letter I wrote to the magazine a month or so ago? Charlie?
Sure. You showed me where they printed it. A North American Review.
Yeah. Well, I've been getting some answers. Editor sent me a batch of answers, and I got them just this morning. Well, I can't read all of them, Charlie.
Why not, Mr. Rogers?
Don't dare. Now, here's one. Mrs. Abrams had 2 sons in the Massachusetts 5th Volunteers, both killed at Antietam. Says if I don't believe her, enclosed, please find a copy of a letter of condolence from the General of the 5th Volunteers commanding. I can't answer that one. Can't even look at it again.
Mr. Rogers, is she Jewish?
Appears so, Charlie.
Oh.
This letter here from one fella gives me the names and regiments of more than 60 soldiers.
All Jews, Mr. Rogers?
Yeah.
You going to write a letter apologizing to the editor of that magazine, Mr. Rogers?
I don't know, Charlie. I've got to do something. The way it seems to me, an apology. What good is that? An apology.
Might make Mrs. Abrams feel better.
She lost 2 sons, Charlie. Doubt if she's looking for apologies. Well, now, here's another letter. From New York. An old soldier called Gerstmann. By Jiminy, I'm going to answer this one at least.
Who is he, Mr. Rogers?
Served in the Army 5 years, he did. Fought under General Hancock at Fredericksburg, at Antietam, and at Cemetery Ridge at Gettysburg. Rose to the rank of lieutenant, he tells me. It tells me General Hancock, after the Battle of Gettysburg, presented him with his very own sword to show what he thought of this fellow's bravery.
Gee. You say he's a lieutenant, Mr. Rogers?
Oh, now, see here, son. If you get to be a lieutenant up from the ranks, that's not the same thing as just being a lieutenant. If you're up from the ranks, it's a different question altogether. Now, you run along, son. We're not going fishing today. I got to sit down here and write a letter. I'm going to apologize to one of these fellas anyhow. dear Simon Gerstmann, one is never too old to learn, and he is a poor soldier who will not do a comrade justice when he demands it, especially a comrade to whom the glorious Hancock left a sword. You must be worthy to wear it. Any of your countrymen who felt that our immortal flag might float will feel with me that you deserve the laurel wreath instead of the badge of disgrace. I hope you find this letter some atonement for that one which I earlier penned to the magazine. Hi, Charlie.
Mr. Rogers, you're all dressed up. And with a suitcase.
Look pretty good, don't I?
You going away, Mr. Rogers?
Oh, I'm coming back tomorrow night, Charlie. Don't you worry. You're not going to get rid of me for a while yet.
Where you going?
New York?
New York? You taking the train?
Yeah. Going down there and meet this Simon Gerstmann, Charlie. And I'm going to fetch him back up here. Do you mind that name?
Sure, the one with General Hancock's sword.
That's the one, boy. He wrote me a letter, said he was sick. So I'm going to fetch him back up here and make sure he gets well again.
Up here in Niantic, you mean?
Well, what's wrong with that? Well, you listen here, son. Guess you don't know about this section of the country. Why, do you know that not so long ago a rich man, a millionaire he was, reached retirement age? He took and he wrote a letter down to the government in Washington. And he asked them where, he says, where is the most healthful part of the whole country for me to retire to? Do you know what the government wrote him back?
Niantic?
Well, it wasn't right here in Niantic exactly, but it was only 10 miles from here, so I guess that goes to show, don't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure does. And it's a lot better than any apology, too. I'll be seeing you, Charlie.
Jim Rogers was back in Niantic 2 days later with Simon Gerstmann from New York. In one respect, the two men were truly alike, for Gerstmann had lost an arm, too.
Don't make no difference, though. You know what, Mr. Gerstmann?
What's that, Charlie?
Mr. Rogers and me, all summer we've been going fishing out in the Sound. But he makes me do all the rowing, 'cause he's only got just the one arm.
Yes?
Now I'll sit in the back and do the chumming, 'cause he's got the left arm and you've got the right, and between you can do the rowing.
The facts are all there. You could look it up. Look up the North American Review for 1891. You can read all about how Jim Rogers changed his mind and all about how he nursed Simon Gerstmann back to health. Well, as I was saying, I hauled off and I told this young fella that story. And when I'd get all through, he looks up at me and says,
Mr. Smith,
he says,
Mr. Smith, that all there is to your story?
and I says to him, that's all there is to it. That's the parable of the man who knew enough to be able to change his mind. And he says to me, he says,
Well, but where's the point of the story, Mr. Smith? Where's the payoff? It's got no twist, no snapperoo.
so I says to him, if you need to ask me the point, I says, if you're looking for a snapperoo, I says, then your heart is cold and full of foolishness.
If you would like a copy of today's script, please send your name and address with 10 cents to cover the cost of postage and handling to the Jewish Theological Seminary, 3080 Broadway, New York 27, New York. And now we take great pleasure in presenting Mr. Charles H. Silver, Vice President of the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation and President of Beth Israel Hospital in New York. Mr. Silver.
In the inspiring play we have just listened to, we have seen that Mr. Rogers labored under a delusion that was not exactly rooted in prejudice, but I would say that he held certain notions that led him to make conclusions not justified by the facts. Why did Mr. Rogers tell young Charlie there were no Hebrews in the Union Army? Was it because he didn't know or was not told? And yet, he had a sense of basic decency and justice. For when he learned that one of his comrades, a Jew, had lost an arm like himself in a great battle of the Civil War, his whole attitude changed from one of disdain to regret and understanding. It seems to me that the reason he didn't know that Jews had served with valor in the Union ranks was because they had enlisted not as Jews, but as Americans. They answered the call to arms with a willingness that indicated a deep devotion to the country of their birth and adoption. It was not a matter of religious belief. It was a love of country that led them to the battlefield. And if one cares to look at the record, he would find that nearly 5,000 Jews, men and boys, fought on the Union side during the Civil War, and one of them received the Congressional Medal of Honor. The Jews of this country have never faltered when the interests of the United States were at stake. Thousands of them enlisted in every branch of the Army services. They asked no reward or acclaim. They were motivated by a deep love of the country, which has made it possible for people of all faiths to worship as they desired and to lead their lives with dignity. In fighting for the United States, the Jewish boys did so in a spirit of deep gratitude for the privileges which they and all others enjoy under the Bill of Rights. If Mr. Rogers were here, I know he would be pleased to learn that in the last war, 500,000 Jewish men and boys, over 500,000, fought in the Second World War. Throughout this land, on public buildings and in private organizations, there are tablets which bear the names of Jews with a little gold star. And if there are still some erroneous impressions about the contribution of Jewish boys to the fighting forces of the United States, time, I am sure, will erase these impressions, and men of all faiths will live together in genuine brotherhood in this, our glorious country.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Our Eternal Eye drama today, The Man Who Changed His Mind by Peter Lyon, was presented in observance of Memorial Day. The music was composed by Morris Momorsky and conducted by Milton Katins. John McGovern was featured as Mr. Rogers, with Cameron Prudhomme as the narrator and David Anderson as Charlie. Cantor David Putterman sang the liturgical introduction. The production was under the direction of Frank Papp. Free time to present The Eternal Light is made available by the National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations. This weekly program is presented under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.